the friendly call. When I used to sell hardware in the West, I often made a little town called Saltillo, in Colorado. I was always certain of securing a small or a large order from Simon Bell, who kept a general store there. Bell was one of those 6-foot, low-voiced products, formed from a union of the West and the South. I liked him. To look at him you would think he should be robbing stagecoaches or juggling gold mines with both hands. But he would sell you a paper of tacks or a spool of thread, with 10 times more patience and courtesy than any sales lady in a city department store. I had a twofold object in my last visit to Saltillo. One was to sell a bill of goods, the other to advise Bell of a chance that I knew of by which I was certain he could make a small fortune. In Mountain City, a town on the Union Pacific, 5 times larger than Saltillo, a mercantile firm was about to go to the wall. It had a lively and growing custom, but was on the edge of dissolution and ruin. Mismanagement and the gambling habits of one of the partners explained it. The condition of the firm was not yet public property. I had my knowledge of it from a private source. I knew that, if the ready cash were offered, the stock and goodwill could be bought for about 1/4 their value. On arriving in Saltillo I went to Bell's store. He nodded to me, smiled his broad, lingering smile, went on leisurely selling some candy to a little girl, then came around the counter and shook hands. "Well," he said, opening parenthesis, his invariably preliminary jocosity fit every call I made, closing parenthesis, "I suppose you were out here making Kodak pictures of the mountains. It's the wrong time of the year to buy any hardware, of course." I told Bell about the bargain in Mountain City. If he wanted to take advantage of it, I would rather have missed a sale than have him overstocked in Saltillo. "It sounds good," he said, with enthusiasm. "I'd like to branch out and do a bigger business, and I'm obliged to you for mentioning it. But well, you come and stay at my house tonight and I'll think about it." It was then after sundown and time for the larger stores in Saltillo to close. The clerks in Bell's put away their books, whirled the combination of the safe, put on their coats and hats and left for their homes. Bell padlocked the big, double wooden front doors, and we stood, for a moment, breathing the keen, fresh mountain air coming across the foothills. A big man walked down the street and stopped in front of the high porch of the store. His long, black mustache, black eyebrows, and curly black hair contrasted queerly with his light, pink complexion, which belonged, by rights, to a blonde. He was about 40, and wore a white vest, a white hat, a watch chain made of $5 gold pieces linked together, and a rather well-fitting 2-piece gray suit of the cut that college boys of 18 are wont to affect. He glanced at me distrustfully, and then at Bell with coldness and, I thought, something of enmity in his expression. "Well," asked Bell, as if he were addressing a stranger, "did you fix up that matter?" "Did I?" the man answered, in a resentful tone. "What do you suppose I've been here 2 weeks for? The business is to be settled tonight. Does that suit you, or have you got something to kick about?" "It's all right," said Bell. "I knew you'd do it." "Of course, you did," said the magnificent stranger. "Haven't I done it before?" "You have," admitted Bell. "And so have I. How do you find it at the hotel?" "Rocky grub. But I ain't kicking. Say, can you give me any pointers about managing that affair? It's my first deal in that line of business, you know." "No, I can't," answered Bell, after some thought. "I've tried all kinds of ways. You'll have to try some of your own. Tried soft soap. Barrels of it. Tried a saddle girth with a buckle on the end of it, never none. Started to once. And here's what I got." Bill held out his right hand. Even in the deepening twilight, I could see on the back of it a long, white scar that might have been made by a claw or a knife or some sharp-edged tool. "Oh, well," said the florid man, carelessly, "I'll know what to do later on." He walked away without another word. When he had gone 10 steps he turned and called to Belle. "You keep well out of the way when the goods are delivered, so there won't be any hitch in the business." "All right," answered Belle, "I'll attend to my end of the line." This talk was scarcely clear in its meaning to me, but as it did not concern me, I did not let it weigh upon my mind. But the singularity of the other man's appearance lingered with me for a while, and as we walked toward Belle's house I remarked to him, "Your customer seems to be a surly kind of fellow. Not one that you'd like to be snowed in with in a camp on a hunting trip." "He is that," assented Belle, heartily. "He reminds me of a rattlesnake that's been poisoned by the bite of a tarantula." "He doesn't look like a citizen of Saltillo," I went on. "No," said Belle, "he lives in Sacramento. He's down here on a little business trip. His name is George Ringo, and he's been my best friend, in fact the only friend I ever had for 20 years. I was too surprised to make any further comment. Belle lived in a comfortable, plain, square, 2-story white house on the edge of the little town. I waited in the parlor, a room depressingly genteel, furnished with red plush, straw matting, looped-up lace curtains, and a glass case large enough to contain a mummy, full of mineral specimens. While I waited, I heard, upstairs, that unmistakable sound instantly recognized the world over a bickering woman's voice, rising as her anger and fury grew. I could hear, between the gusts, the temperate rumble of Belle's tones, striving to oil the troubled waters. The storm subsided soon, but not before I had heard the woman say, in a lower, concentrated tone, rather more carrying than her high-pitched railings, "This is the last time. I tell you, the last time. Oh, you will understand." The household seemed to consist of only Belle and his wife and a servant or two. I was introduced to Mrs. Belle at supper. At first sight she seemed to be a handsome woman, but I soon perceived that her charm had been spoiled. An uncontrolled petulance, I thought, an emotional egotism, and absence of poise and a habitual dissatisfaction had marred her womanhood. During the meal, she showed that false gaiety, spurious kindliness and reactionary softness that mark the woman addicted to tantrums. Withal, she was a woman who might be attractive to many men. After supper, Belle and I took our chairs outside, set them on the grass in the moonlight and smoked. The full moon is a witch. In her light, truthful men dig up for you nuggets of pure gold, while liars squeeze out brighter colors from the tubes of their invention. I saw Belle's broad, slow smile come out upon his face and linger there. "I reckon you think George and me are a funny kind of friends," he said. "The fact is we never did take much interest in each other's company. But his idea and mine, of what a friend should be, was always synonymous, and we lived up to it, strict, all these years. Now, I'll give you an idea of what our idea is. A man don't need but one friend. The fellow who drinks your liquor and hangs around you, slapping you on the back and taking up your time, telling you how much he likes you, ain't a friend, even if you did play marbles at school and fish in the same creek with him. As long as you don't need a friend, one of that kind may answer. But a friend, to my mind, is one you can deal with on a strict reciprocity basis, like me and George have always done. A good many years ago, him and me was connected in a number of ways. We put our capital together and run a line of freight wagons in New Mexico, and we mined some and gambled a few. And then, we got into trouble of one or two kinds. And I reckon that got us on a better understandable basis than anything else did, unless it was the fact that we never had much personal use for each other's ways. George is the vainest man I ever see, and the biggest brag. He could blow the biggest geyser in the Yosemite Valley back into its hole with one whisper. I am a quiet man, and fond of studiousness and thought. The more we used to see each other, personally, the less we seemed to like to be together. If he ever had slapped me on the back and sniveled over me like I've seen men do to what they called their friends, I know I'd have had a rough and tumble with him on the spot. Same way with George. He hated my ways as bad as I did his. When we were mining, we lived in separate tents, so as not to intrude our obnoxiousness on each other. But after a long time, we begun to know each of us could depend on the other when we were in a pinch, up to his last dollar, word of honor or perjury, bullet, or drop of blood we had in the world. We never even spoke of it to each other, because that would have spoiled it. But we tried it out, time after time, until we came to know. I grabbed my hat and jumped a freight and rode 200 miles to identify him when he was about to be hung by mistake, in Idaho, for a train robber. Once, I laid sick of typhoid in a tent in Texas, without $1 or a change of clothes, and sent for George in Boise City. He came on the next train. The first thing he did before speaking to me was to hang up a little looking glass on the side of the tent and curl his mustache and rub some hair dye on his head. His hair is naturally a light reddish. Then he gave me the most scientific cussing I ever had, and took off his coat. "If you wasn't a Moses meek little Mary's lamb, you wouldn't have been took down this way," says he. "Haven't you got gumption enough not to drink swamp water or fall down and scream whenever you have a little colic or feel a mosquito bite you?" He made me a little mad. "You've got the bedside manners of a Pute medicine man," says I. "And I wish you'd go away and let me die a natural death. I'm sorry I sent for you."
Please subscribe to Learn with Cartoon channel if you are not subscribed and share the video. Thank you for watching.